Well, hello folks. I came back this evening to find this in my hedge. A very bedraggled looking swarm. There was very heavy thundery showers this afternoon, and unfortunately they obviously got caught out in it. Now, where did this come from? And the reason I'm showing you this is because all beekeepers can make a mistake, no matter how long you've been keeping bees. Cumulatively, I've been keeping bees for about 20 years, and you know, I still make mistakes, and that's because bees are, you know, a semi-wild creature. We've tried to tame them down and try to manage them, but ultimately they do things sometimes that are unexplained, and only they know the reasons themselves. But I think what has actually happened is some of these splits that I made up, you can see there's a stack of two there. These two are where I had put in queen cells, and I made these splits up. They're actually taken from colonies on this location, this particular apiary, and I inserted the queen cells, and I checked them last Saturday to check for emergence, and today it's Friday, so I checked them for emergence, and the queen cells had hatched. And I also did a double check through to make sure that they hadn't drawn any emergency queen cells. In one of them I found emergency queen cells, all right, 2 or 3 emergency queen cells. In the other I didn't. So I left all alone, and I thought, this is great, when the queen comes out to mate and so on, they'll settle down. And by this stage all brood appeared to be capped and you know, well advanced, so that there was unlikely to be any chance of an emergency queen cell. But I must have missed one somewhere tucked in a corner of a frame, and what's obviously after happening is it's either one of two things, but I suspect that I'm going to delve in now and find either an emerged virgin or an emergency queen cell that's about to hatch. The other thing is these nukes are actually made up very strong, because I took them from a colony that was on this particular spot, and I turned that colony around. You can see it was in this nuke box, and this nuke box was stacked to take extra splits off it. I was kind of using it as a brood factory, so I turned the entrance to that nuke box around to face in the opposite direction, and I stacked these two nukes on top of each other. It removed the brood frames from the extra brood frames that I put in into that to make up the 2 splits, and allowed then the flying bees return to these 2 nooks. So they were crammed with bees. So the other thing that might have happened is that the queen just decided she didn't want to stay. They were too crammed, and she didn't want to stay in the colony. Or when she emerged to mate, which was literally just before a thunder shower, there was kind of a panic with some of the bees and they left. So I'm going to take a look in now just to see what actually happened. But I am expecting to find an emergency queen cell or an emerged virgin. So I suppose just to explain how I know it might be this colony is I came home and I found them in the hedge, the swarm in the hedge, and I just went through everything here just to see, and this particular one has very much a reduced population. I'll just show you with this one what I'm talking about. I'm being crammed. You can see there that that's a packed nuke. So, whereas the next one, the one below, which was similarly packed, is showing very much a reduced population. Now I'm just going to drop them down there for the moment. It's about 6 o'clock. It's about 6 o'clock now, so there's no risk of a virgin queen coming back, say to that top box for example, and with this bottom box we know that our queen has left. So you can see here very much a reduced population, and they were building comb in the feed space, and that's how crammed they were in here. And there's still quite a lot of bees, but you can see that they're a bit feisty now. There was a lot of brood. There was 3 frames of brood went in here that had to hatch. The weather has been very poor for this past week or so. So these bees are quite dry looking on this comb. This was actually a frame of stores that was put in. And it's completely empty. And although I do see these bees flying mostly every day, there is very little in here for them. And it could be this that led to the colony kind of taking off with the queen when she left. So you can see this was one of the brood frames, and there's still a good bit to hatch. And they are putting a bit of nectar up across the top of the frame. So depending on what I come across in here, that will sort of lead me to making a decision what I do with the swarm. There are only 3 frames of brood, so this is the second frame, and what's that clustering at the bottom? No, it's not covering a queen cell. Aha! we have, I think, an emergency cell here. Yep. And it looks like it's about to hatch. So right here. And I missed that, obviously. So accidents can happen, things can go missed. So that's one emergency cell, and I'm fairly sure that when I would have done my double check, a lot of there would have been very little brood left in this that would have been viable to turn into a queen cell. So I mean, I'm not too keen on keeping that cell as a queen cell to allow it to hatch. I don't see. Our queens would have literally just come out to mate now. So we wouldn't have eggs yet. As I said, the weather has been very, very poor. So queens coming out to mate, there's a high chance of losing them. Yeah, there's a couple of queen cups here, but no queen cells, so that's the only one I missed. So I think what I might be able to do is return this swarm now. If I cut down that queen cell, leave them to settle for a few minutes while I catch the swarm, and then we'll be able to return. So we found our little problem, and I think what I'm actually going to do with this is I'm going to gather up the swarm and return it back to this nucleus box. I'm going to just pinch the queen cell. It's an emergency cell. I wouldn't be happy to keep it. The likelihood is that the brood was well over, you know, the 4-day-old period. As I said in previous video, bees can and will draw emergency cells. Yeah, a runty little virgin queen. So unfortunately she has to be pinched, but you can see there she's quite small, and it's just one of the sad realities of beekeeping. Well, if you want to, you know, keep successful hives. So I have removed her, and I'm now going to gather up the swarm. Hopefully our queen has survived the downpour, and we can return her to this box, and hopefully all settles down back to normal tonight. Now I have kind of done this before in other situations where queens are absconding from a box and so on, and ultimately I find that it doesn't work out too successfully. You return the queen and you come back a few days later and she's gone, where she went off on a mating flight and she just didn't return. This whole swarming kind of thing, it's like sometimes when you catch a cast swarm, you know, everything looks good in the cast swarm, you might only have one virgin queen in it, but when she actually goes out then to mate, for some reason she doesn't return home. So it's like as though she gets damaged in the kind of the swarming process, you know. Now I can't say that for certain, and virgin queens go missing for a multitude of reasons, You know, swallows can pick them up or whatever when they're out in their mating flight. So that may be all that's happening, but I do think in this, myself, in the act of swarming, when a virgin queen goes out, her wings get damaged because in particular caste swarms, they're not as or you know, swarms that leave with a virgin queen, they're not as organised as a swarm that seem to leave with a mated queen. So I think that's just one of the unfortunate side effects, but I'm going to put her back in this box anyway and hope for the best, and I'll report back in a few days when I have checked up on them again, just to see how they're getting on. Now, this comb was just taken out of a colony with food stores in it, but it's actually not a great frame. Ultimately, when I move these bees into a full-size box, this one will probably be changed out. So that's just to show you that anybody can make mistakes. We can all miss things. From time to time it happens. You know, it's no big deal if these things happen, especially when you're keeping multiple colonies. You know, these things can happen quite easily. You know, when you're trying to rush through a number of colonies in a small weather window that you might have or whatever, it's easy to miss things or take shortcuts. I didn't shake the bees off the frames here, and actually I suppose I wouldn't have shaken the bees off anyway, because it was a mated virgin and you'd be afraid that she might take off, and an unmated virgin I should say, in the hive, and you'd be afraid that she might take off and then not know her way back. So the truth of the matter is, I probably made up these splits you know, too soon before inserting the queen cells, and I didn't give them enough time then to make assessments then for emergency cells. But that happens too when you're pressed for time to get your splits made up and so on. So I'm going to go and get a lift box to put on top of this, just then to drop the swarm into when I catch them, and we'll go from there. And I'll update you in a few days as to whether or not she has successfully reintegrated back into this colony. So I'm just going to use this empty nuke box to capture the swarm, and the first thing I'm going to do is going to slide the lid under the swarm if I can, just to stop them dropping down into the bushes here. Now, these bees have got a right soaking, so they're not going to be too keen about flying anywhere. But if I can slide this underneath, I just might stop them from dropping down into the hedge. Because if I lose my queen down there, I'll never get her back. And that colony is a write-off then altogether. So I just want to be careful here. Now you can see that they're relatively subdued, and this mightn't work. I mightn't be able to get this under. Or I could drop them in the process, which is not the intention. Anyway, I have a secateurs here, and I'm going to cut this nettle out of the way. Funny enough, my wife always laughs at this. I get stung by bees quite a lot, You know, you can see in my videos that I go around with a t-shirt most of the time. That's how I work my bees. But I do get stung in the hands from time to time, or on the arms. But I don't seem to mind bee stings. But I hate nettle stings. It's a relatively accessible location, but unfortunately they didn't land on very sturdy growth, I suppose. They decided to land on willow herb and a briar, which of course buckled under the weight. So, not a great choice, bees, but that's where they are, so we'll just have to try and do the best we can. If I spot the queen, it'd be great. I probably should have a cage with me. Well, actually I have one in my belt, and these round cages. So if we spot her, we'll try and cage her. So I'm not shaking these bees off any of this yet. I'll just leave them in there into this nuke box. I'm not going to upset them. I don't want too many bees flying about. Because then my queen could take off. I think if I just do this gently and then shake them once I get to the hive, there's a chance then that she might return to it anyway, if the bees are been shook into it. Well, that was not intended. See, once bees take to the air, the swarm kind of gets excited. And then the chance of finding your queen before she takes flight is very difficult. Is slim chance. So I'm just taking up the vegetation with bees attached and I'm putting it into the nuke. I'm not, as I said, shaking them off. Because the hope is then that I'll try and prevent bees taken to the air if at all possible, and I have a better chance of getting my queen. Now, she could already be in what I have gathered up so far. That would be fantastic. But sod's law is, you know, the queen will usually be in the last bundle of bees that's on the branches. So I'm just going to keep an eye out for her here and try and gather up as much of these as I can. Thankfully these bees are nice and calm. They're not too keen on flying. As this is a virgin as well, if I listen out, she might start piping now that she's disturbed. And then I can tell where she is. I see her. So she's here. I might be able to get her now in this. So I know she's still here. This is where I got to be careful now because I'm kind of getting into more leafy growth, and also they will start working down into the hedge now. If I'm not careful. Now that I have the bulk of the bees, you know, this queen might likely, when I dump them into their original box, they'll start fanning, and there is potential for her to return. I see her. I'm going to try and catch her. Oh. Come on, me darling. So unfortunately, she's a virgin. It does make her just a little bit more we got her. So I have her in my cage now. So that's her safe. So now we can leave with the rest of the bees, and I leave her in the cage until I settle the swarm down, and then eventually I'll release her in once the swarm have settled back into the colony. So I have her here contained in the cage now. So once the bees settle down in the original colony, then I'll release her into it. So I've no risk of her taking off and flying now at this point. So there's still a few bees left there, but I'm not too worried about them. They'll actually return back to their colony once they realise the queen is gone. So you can see what I've done here. I've put a lift on. It just gives me a bit of space to empty the bees in from this box, shake them in gradually, and when they work down into the frames, then you know, I'll be able to then release the queen. So for now, I'm just going to, just so that the bees know that the queen is there, I'm going to just leave her on the cage, resting on top, and then we will shake the bees down. And you can see already that they've climbed up onto the cage. They know the queen is there now, and they're excited. Look, they're already starting to fan. So when I put the rest of these bees in, this colony will settle back down to normal, and I'm actually going to give them a feed then for the night, and that'll sort of occupy them. So you can see they're very excited here. They're not being aggressive on the cage, they're not trying to sting it. This is their queen, the queen that left from this box. Okay. So as you can see, these bees, you know, are very happy that the queen is back. So I think we're safe enough with this colony. Now, I'll just clear a bit of space here in the top bars and hopefully run her down into it. I actually don't like these roller cages because the snap-on lid has a tendency when you open it to fold back over again, and then if you're releasing a queen like this, to pinch her or crush her. But anyway, I'll try and do this as carefully as I can. And there she is, and she is gone back down. I'm delighted. Happy days. And now I just want to smoke these bees down again, and I'm going to get a queen excluder on top here to then rest my kilo of fondant on. And judging by the amount of stores that these bees have, which is next to nil, they will gobble this up, and that will sort of keep them occupied for a little while. Over the next day or two. Yeah, come on. So there you go. Mistakes can be made by anybody. Don't knock yourself, don't beat yourself up over it. A mistake can also be corrected. Now, I've obviously carried out a step here to try and correct that mistake. Whether it'll be successful or not is another thing. But as I said, I'll check back in a few days, and I'll give you an update on it just to let you know how it went. But there's no guarantee, but I'm hoping that will have done the trick. Now I'm going to return this little colony to its spot. They look happy out there. Perhaps I should double check them though, just to make sure. I think I might do that now that I have this opportunity. These bees could possibly be also doing with a feed. We'll see when we delve in. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, if you like my videos, just hit that like button and subscribe, and all of that helps out the channel. Okay, thanks, and bye for now. Yep. Same spot as 2 days ago. Well, practically the same spot. And I come home this afternoon to find this hanging in the hedge. I have scouted around at the colonies, which I only checked 7 or 8 days ago now, and there was absolutely no signs of swarming in any of them. So this is somewhat of a surprise, but I think I've worked out which colony it came from. It's not a huge swarm, and that's possibly because I took splits, but also I've noticed the bees generally in the last most of my colonies, the queens have actually been on brood breaks for the last fortnight or so. So when I say brood breaks, the queens haven't been just on full lay, and so if you go into the colonies, the brood has been diminishing, and the population, the colony sizes have been dwindling a little bit, and in fact they weren't that large anyway to begin with. Colonies didn't really build up much this year in comparison to other years. Also, just going through the supers in the colonies, quite a lot of them are bone dry, where there was nectar say a month ago in some of them, or 2 to 3 weeks ago. Some of them are bone dry, and in fact any foundation that I put in that was being drawn and nectar starting to be put into it is definitely it's bone dry. I was just looking at a couple of the supers there yesterday, so it's fairly sobering now, to tell you the truth, but that's beekeeping, and not every year can be a good year. So it looks like this is going to be one of those years that's going to be, the honey crop is going to be poor, but we'll try and make the best of it. Blackberry is, well, it's about a week and a half in flower now, but it's hard to tell whether the bees are actually working it or not. I'm sure they are, but it hasn't created that kind of flow effect yet. Clover is in flower as well. I have seen the bees working some of that, but I've also seen bees working things that I personally haven't really seen bees work a lot of before, and such things as cow parsley and the buttercup. They're crazy on the buttercup this year, and like it's not a common occurrence that I would see bees working buttercup to the level that they're working buttercup here now. So that's probably a sign of the year that it is, but that's where we are. Anyway, I'm going to crack on and catch this swarm. Waste not, want not, as they say. And I've identified it as coming from one of my own colonies. It's in the hedge here in the apiary anyway, so the likelihood is, although I do notice swarms are attracted to from outside of my apiary to this spot as well. I've always found that over the years, that swarms will be attracted in from outside of the apiary, so you just have to watch that. But I'm pretty sure that this is from one of the colonies here. So anyway, I'm going to catch it, and yeah, that's it. See you in the next one.